Welcome back to my disembodied voice. The other day, me and Mrs. Crow were watching an old documentary about Fred and Rose West, the notorious serial killers, when one of the people being interviewed on it, a psychologist, talked about the differences between cognitive and affective empathy and how, as the Wests had very perceptive cognitive empathy but zero affective empathy when it came to their victims, it made them extremely ruthless and cruel, yet efficient at amassing such a large body count. And it gave me an idea for this video, as we haven't dwelled much on psychopathy of late, of how cognitive and affective empathy have been portrayed in the movies when it comes to the monstrous psychopaths that we love to hate. So, for today's video, join me as we look at some famous movie psychopaths and go on a journey to see why having great cognitive empathy but zero affective empathy makes them into such lethal killers and captivating characters. So, as we're getting straight into it this week, let me warn thee of spoilers ahoy for any movie we talk about today, and, as ever, take a look at what flow-through chart we'll be following. Right then, today's topics are psychopathy, affective empathy, cognitive empathy, emotional contagion. Right then, let's crack on. Okay, so before we get to the crux of what cognitive and affective empathy are, we need to look at what makes a psychopath and establish what psychopathy is. So, before we start on our movies, let's talk about psychopathy. Psychopathy is not a formal clinical diagnosis. It is a term used to refer to symptoms of antisocial personality disorder like low empathy and a lack of remorse. Now, the crucial words to focus on here are antisocial personality disorder, and that's because psychopathy exists on the continuum of antisocial personality disorder. Now, I've covered antisocial personality disorder in my videos before on movies like The Strangers, which are a brilliant example of the disorder in young people. But let's have a refresher if you're new to the disorder, haven't seen any of my previous content, and want to learn more. Okay, let's start with a personality disorder's definition. Okay, a personality disorder must contain these three things: problematic, pervasive, permanent. And if you're afflicted with a personality disorder, this means you have a pattern of characteristics which need to be present for over 2 years or more. Now, personality is the pattern of characteristics across the whole matrix of the persona, and when something is disordered, your method of interacting with the world becomes problematic because of a rigid way of thinking which leads to acting in ways which are incongruent and incompatible. So, someone with a personality disorder might get intense emotions, react very negatively to problems, get easily frustrated and upset, have low self-esteem and self-confidence. Now, this is just a snapshot, but we are talking about antisocial personality disorder, and whilst drugs and alcohol may be a habit of someone with antisocial personality disorder, it's important to remember that to get a diagnosis, drugs and alcohol cannot be the reason for the behaviour. In other words, antisocial personality disorder needs to encompass things like a failure to conform to social norms and laws, indicated by repeatedly engaging in illegal activities, and deceitfulness, indicated by continuously lying, using aliases, or conning others for personal gain or pleasure. And these are present regardless of any drug-induced state or intoxication. And it's important to remember that antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy are not the same. Antisocial personality disorder is a behaviour-based diagnosis, whilst psychopathy is more focused on personality traits. For example, an individual might meet the criteria for antisocial personality disorder without exhibiting the specific personality traits associated with psychopathy. Okay, let's look at the criteria for antisocial personality disorder first. Now, according to the DSM, Volume 5, There is a pervasive pattern of disregard and violation of the rights of others occurring since the age of 15 years, as indicated by three or more of the following. Number 1. Failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviours, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Number 2. Deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Number 3. Impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Number 4. Irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. Number 5. Reckless disregard for safety of self or others. Number 6. Consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behaviour or honour financial obligations. Number 7. A lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalising having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. And then we come on to Category B. The individual is at least aged 18 years. Category C. There is evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age 15 years. Category D. The occurrence of antisocial behaviour is not exclusively during the course of a schizophrenic or manic episode. Okay, so that's antisocial personality disorder, but let's head to the other end of that spectrum and look at psychopathy. Now, for psychopathy, like we said, we're talking about traits and symptoms of antisocial personality disorder, so we need what is on the following list. Exhibiting impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Irritability and aggressiveness. Reckless behaviour that disregard others' safety. Glib and superficial charm. Grandiose, exaggeratedly high estimation of self. Need for stimulation. Pathological lying. Cunning and manipulativeness. Lack of remorse or guilt. Superficial emotional responses. Callousness and lack of empathy. Parasitic lifestyle. Impulsivity. Failure to accept responsibility for own actions. Criminal versatility. Okay, so for psychopathy, we have a clear picture of what our villains need to exhibit. Now, it's important that I remind everyone that just because you have antisocial personality disorder, this doesn't make you a psychopath, and only 25 to 30% of people diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder have psychopathy. However, as we can see, lack of empathy is crucial here when assessing for psychopathy, as psychopaths are calm and resistant to chaos, and that's because, as this picture shows, they have reduced activity in the limbic system and also reduced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex. Now, the limbic system is all about emotivity, fight or flight, and activating hormones which change our body's chemistry. However, the medial prefrontal cortex, which links our frontal lobe thinking area to the limbic backbrain area via the anterior cingulate cortex, does the following things. Executive function. It plays a key role in cognitive processes like decision making and working memory. Memory. It is involved in learning associations between events and appropriate responses, particularly emotional responses. Emotional regulation. It helps regulate emotions and is involved in the processing of pain and stress responses. Social cognition. It contributes to understanding and responding to social cues and is active during interactions with others. Temporal control. It is also involved in the temporal control of actions, allowing us to respond appropriately to stimuli at the right time. So, as our picture shows, if these parts of the brain aren't lighting up, working and linking, we have something missing. Basically, if the medial prefrontal cortex isn't working alongside or with the limbic system, there's going to be dramatic changes to someone's actions and personality. And that something is what we would assume is very human responses and thoughts and actions and understanding of other people around us. Empathy isn't just about understanding pain, it's about understanding love, distress, and many other things. If we don't recognise things like distress, then how do we know if we are hurting someone? Now, psychopaths are missing this crucial tenet, empathy, of human connection, and so we arrive at affective empathy. This denotes a range of emotional responses we can have to what others feel or the situation they are in, which include sympathy, anger, or contagious joy. Empathy is a crucial human ability because of its importance for pro-social behaviour and for moral development. In 2008, Hare and Newman felt that psychopathy encompassed two independent yet correlated dimensions, namely interpersonal affective traits, so primary psychopathy of superficial charm, manipulation, callousness, absence of remorse, shallow affect, and impulsive antisocial features, secondary psychopathy of impulsivity, lack of behavioural control, criminal versatility, and recidivism. Criminal behaviour presents a central role within this model, as psychopathy traits are considered to be intrinsically linked to antisocial manifestations from a genetic and longitudinal standpoint. Now, as we stated before, deficits in limbic and medial prefrontal cortex areas are renowned in psychopathy, and all of our villains are criminals. Hannibal Lecter was a cannibal who ate his victims, Max Cady was a rapist, Anton Chigurh is less formed here as he is a hired goon sent to retrieve a case, but he is equally reprehensible when it comes to just slaughtering people. And the Joker is an absolute anarchist. In Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter shows no remorse or even understanding of his somewhat unorthodox murder of his cell neighbour, the semen-flinging Miggs. And when he finally breaks out of his cell at the end of the movie, his pummeling of the guards and then collection of a penknife to remove the face of one of his victims is done with a very matter-of-fact expression of calmness. Lest we forget, as Dr. Chilton states when telling Clarice, Lecter's pulse never went above 85, even when he ate the nurse's tongue who leant over him. Lecter is resistant to chaos and escapes with great calmness. Anton Chigurh shows an incredible lack of empathy, either through playing a coin toss for a life or cattle bolting a civilian to death. And when killing Woody Harrelson, he is so calm that the non-verbal cues of sweating or the terrified expression of his victim does nothing for him, and he fails to react to anything. There is no understanding that a life is ending, no care, no connection, or association of guilt to his actions. In the movie Orphan, whether it's using hammers or knives or pulling flowers from a grave to give to a horrified relative, Esther feels nothing and has no understanding of the tears and heartbreak she causes. Antisocial to the core, but unable to process the sheer grief she causes or truly understand the horror on someone else's face. After all, 70% of all communication between humans is nonverbal, and psychopaths show strong symptoms of semantic aphasia, where words and objects don't carry meaning or understanding, as well as social emotional agnosia, which is where they cannot recognise facial expressions such as horror or fear. Therefore, our psychopaths continue to ruin people's lives and just don't understand the sheer devastation and hurt they cause. So, in recap, affective empathy is sharing an emotional experience, feeling distress in response to someone's pain, experiencing a willingness to help someone. Affective empathy denotes a range of emotional responses we can have to what others feel or the situation they are in, which include sympathy, empathic anger, and contagious joy. And because psychopaths don't possess affective empathy, they show lack of guilt, remorse, or empathy, pretending to feel emotions, inability to form true emotional attachments. They tend to be successful. They're dishonest. Manipulative behaviour, superficial charm, and narcissism. Okay, so that's affective empathy. Let's come to the other side of the coin and do cognitive empathy. The ability to grasp what other people are thinking, feeling, or experiencing. It's the intellectual understanding of someone's perspective. Cognitive empathy involves knowing how other people think and feel, so being aware of their reactions and predicting what will trigger them. It's basically being able to step into someone's mind and know what they might be thinking, and, in essence, you can imagine what it might be like to be that person in their situation, giving you a better understanding of their behaviour and what they will do next. And perhaps there's no better example of cognitive empathy than Max Cady in Cape Fear. In Cape Fear, hang on. In Cape Fear, Max Cady is released from prison and goes after his counsellor, Nick Nolte. Now, if Cady wants revenge, he can just beat Nick Nolte to death, but this isn't about a simple eye for an eye. He wants to torment him and bring him to his knees by systematic brutalisation. And to do that, he's going to hurt the ones he loves and drive him to insanity. Cady has spent years in prison and has spent all of that time thinking just what he wants to do to the man who didn't do enough to get him out of prison in the first place. So, by using cognitive empathy, he knows his weak spots. Now, Cady might not be capable of love, but he knows Nick Nolte is. So, Cady goes after his daughter, threatens to rape his wife, and brings Nick Nolte's life into ruins by beating and raping a courthouse clerk who is attracted to Nick Nolte. Now, Cady knows how to ruin Nick Nolte's career and gets a restraining order. Overall, Cady breaks his life down piece by intercepting it and knowing how it works. He then knows they are heading to the houseboat as he can predict every move they make, and, whilst preparing to rape the wife and daughter, he knows how to torment Nick Nolte because, like I said, Cady isn't capable of love, but he understands that Nick Nolte loves his family, and seeing them in absolute terror and being brutalised is going to cause more damage. In Silence of the Lambs, Lecter outsmarts Chilton and the FBI time and time again with intelligence. And when it comes to Buffalo Bill or orchestrating his own escape, Lecter knows how people think and what to do. He knows how to draw attention away from himself with the dummy corpse, and he knows that an injured police officer will blindside the team so much in terms of their focus and anger that he'll be able to sneak outside undetected whilst the rest of the police chase a corpse in an elevator. In Orphan, Esther knows how to manipulate the family, cause division, and what to do to both look like a small child and to get under the skin of the family. Each time, all our psychopaths use cognitive empathy because just because they cannot feel love or connection, they understand people's feelings from an intellectual perspective, so they can manipulate, blend in, or just escape when they need to. And in The Dark Knight, the Joker knows that Batman has one rule and he can manipulate this. And he does this because he sees how the hero thinks. He sees how people work. He outguesses Batman each time because whilst he has no inclination for good or for to care about anyone, he understands that people like Batman do care and will go to extremes as part of a moral conscience. The Joker also convinces his goons to rob a bank at the start under the premise that they will kill each other as each stage of the robbery is cleared. The aim here is greed, and it's greed that the Joker knows will cause the men to kill each other because each of those men want more of a slice and know that eliminating the previous one gets them more money. The entire manipulation of these men would not be possible without knowing them, infiltrating their thought patterns, seeing the manipulation and using cognitive empathy in how desperate criminals will screw each other over for more money, not tell each other what they're going to do, and then have them eating out the palm of his hand in terms of working for him. Finally, we come to emotional contagion, the conduction and communication of emotions and behaviours which leads to unconsciously shared emotional states. It's important to understand how emotions work when it comes to things like psychopathy because, as per cognitive empathy, an understanding of emotivity helps someone with psychopathy control people. Now, a good example of emotional contagion is joy. After all, if you're at a party and everyone's having fun and dancing around and drinking and smiling and laughing, then the happiness spreads like an infection and soon the whole room is loving every second. In The Dark Knight, there's a really good example of emotional contagion, and that's in the boats at the end of the movie where the Joker plans to test the people with explosives. The Joker has already laid out his plan with, "When the chips are down, these civilized people will eat each other" speech, and this is tested on the boats as one must blow up the other to survive. The aim here is to spread fear and let that catch on, so the emotive panic eliminates rationality and either the criminals kill the civilians or vice versa. Like joy, fear is a response that catches fire quickly. Remember COVID and panic buying, for example. And all you need is to show someone frightened and overreacting and then wait for everyone else to follow in the same overreaction. People act as others, and the Joker uses this emotional contagion to try and cause a massacre. And again, let's go back. The Joker's good cognitive empathy understands how people think, and he can see how and why people will turn on each other, all band together, and almost homogenize into de-individuation. Basically, a group will think as one. In Silence of the Lambs, like I stated before, Lecter knows that once the police see one of their own injured and knows he has escaped, all the focus will change and divert because the emotivity will spread amongst the terrified and angry police who have lost two of their own. The distress of seeing Sergeant Pembry dying on the floor causes the whole team to act as one. They are angry, upset, and they go into a uniformity which is predictable. Watch how they shout at each other, tell them to say the right words. Immediately the panic spreads, all whilst the dummy Pembry is lying on the floor. Psychopaths may have less emotivity due to blunted effect from their limbic system and also lack of emotional connectivity between frontal lobe and limbic system, but they love emotional contagion because they can just sit back and watch other people operate. It's why serial killers watch the news for the outrage over their crimes. It's why they reattend their crime scenes. And it's what makes them so cold and calculating, because not only do they enjoy watching the devastation that their crimes cause, but they can also spot stragglers, identify people who can be groomed and manipulated, and see submissive people that they can dominate. For Cady, Lecter, Esther and many more psychopaths, they take a perspective, learn to understand emotions, and this then enables them to predict behaviour via things like emotional contagion and cognitive empathy. Seeing how people act creates an imprint and a view of the world that they can then manipulate. Basically, the perception and resonance of affective states are thought to result in shared representations of oneself and others. We mirror through our communication and actions, and we are drawn to people who share our contagion. Evidence suggests that for particular emotions such as fear, disgust, and pain, there are brain regions that map the emotions of another onto oneself. That is, we are not simply understanding the emotions of another person, we are also feeling them and feeling them with the other person. These abilities are found to be grounded in shared representations. However, for psychopaths, they map them but don't necessarily imprint and feel them, so they are free of emotional contagion and have no effective empathy, but they still understand people's actions and reactions through seeing emotional contagion and how others react through these endemic states of shared emotivity by cognitive empathy. But it's also important to understand that the people they see, monitor, assess, and are able to imprint themselves onto and then groom are because of the emotional patterns that they see in people. And it's this that helps them locate stray or lonely victims who can be groomed, organise an escape route when they are stuck, guess an outcome of an investigation by the police, and charm the police with innocence and normality, much like the Yorkshire Ripper did, as he was interviewed 9 times by police and never once buckled and carried on his killing spree. It's why people like Fred and Rose West, who I started talking about in the early stages of this video, were able to understand and avoid detection, locate stragglers, torture without conception of someone else's pain, and then charm and lie their way through society for so long by creating an edifice of normality that spreads an emotional contagion of acceptance, ignorance, likability, and thus enables them to keep killing over and over again. Watch any Netflix serial killer documentary or drama and see how, in the end, everyone is just so bemused at how that nice person or normal seeing couple were able to torture, kill, and ruin so many lives. Anyway, that's it for this week's video, so remember that psychology is cool. Please like, share and subscribe, as more subs means more vids, and even leave a comment or start a discussion, as healthy debate is always welcome on here. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.
Sent me to this dank, urine-soaked hell.